Okay, welcome to the second running of an Ask the Experts, brought to you by the Geospatial Sales team, well, me, and a couple of my colleagues from the Global Support team. We've got James McGuire, who's the Asia Pacific Regional Support Manager, and Neil Harvey, who's in Geospatial Support as well. So we have taken some questions beforehand on a form that we set up on the Google Forms. We've put those into a PowerPoint so that we can discuss those, and it makes it a little bit easier for people to see the questions that we had entered already. We've just taken a selection of what was lodged on that format. And anything that you want to lodge and have us answer at the moment, we should be able to get to a few of those as well. There's a question panel just to put your questions through that way. Just because of usually the amount of people sitting on the calls, we auto mute your microphones so that it makes it a little bit easier to manage. But start firing through the questions, and as we see them, we'll start to deal with those as they come in. All right, well, we better jump in, and hope you're all doing well today. And here we go. So the first question that we had coming in, and I'll just make sure that everyone can see what I've got. Yep, was about the new Trimble Access release. It's 2020.00, and it's now on the TDC 600 as well as our TSC7, T7, and T10 controllers. And I had a question coming in: will it support all of the receivers, including the R12, or is the R12 restricted to our Windows 10 receivers? There are no restrictions on the TDC 600 related to GNSS receivers. So any of the receivers that you'd normally see supported with Trimble Access on our other handhelds are also supported on the TDC 600 and the Access version running on there that's on an Android operating system now. There are a couple of things that aren't supported in there. So one is that you can't use the TDC 600 with an SX10. There's some limitations with Android operating systems and just the ability to deal with some pretty heavy processing. So there's not that connection into the SX10. We're not supporting IFC in there at the moment. And that again comes into how we can leverage the operating system. The other one we don't have is limit box. So with Trimble Access 2020, we introduced a new limit box command where you can limit the size of the point cloud that you're actually viewing on screen at the time to help clean up your map view, make it a little bit easier to navigate. That's not in there at the moment either, but because we're not supporting the SX10, which is mainly where the point clouds are coming from, then it's probably not a problem either. It does connect to our Trimble total station. So with the TDL 2.4 radio, you could use long range radio through that format, or if you're just looking at it from a small controller perspective of an upgrade, you can Bluetooth onto the S series total stations as well. If you wanted more information around some of the support and any little details on whether it does or doesn't support it, first place to go to, I would say, is the Trimble Access Help portal. Just search Trimble Access Help portal and you'll see it come up as the top hit, hopefully. And from there, you can navigate to the release notes. And the release notes always provide a lot of information around new functionality that's been introduced with a release, and also anything that might not be supported or not supported currently, like what I've just described here. So hopefully that provided enough information on that particular one, plus some added extra. We'll jump to slide 2, which James can elaborate on.
Yep, so the question is in Trimble Access, how to create a road from a DXF file, basically. So, yep, they've got the alignment from a polyline, and they're now wanting to sort of assign other DXF lines to it. Now, with a DXF file or any sort of background file that contains polylines, you can create the master alignment from that just simply by selecting it. However, you cannot assign sub-alignments to it. So if you want to create a full sort of road design within Trimble Access roads, what you'd need to do is create some templates and assign that to your master alignment. Or you can copy templates too. So if you've got another RxL file, you can copy them. If you want to stake the polylines, there is options in Trimble Access 2020. You can just select a polyline and stake. You don't have to create an alignment or anything. Older versions, you can select it and define an alignment out of it. Also, if you've got 3D faces in your DXF file, you can stake that as a DTM. If you did want to use a string-based road format with Trimble Access roads, the formats supported are the GNIO or GNIO format, and also new to Trimble Access 2020 is a Land XML format, where you can have your master alignment, then you can have like break lines for your substrings. That can be exported from TBC. I think there are a couple of other packages that can export that as well. And also we can convert 12DA files into a GNIO format. So you can take a 12DA file from 12D, and then we've got a little utility which can either be run on your desktop, or it can be run on the controller itself to convert it into a GNIO string-based road design.
Okay, yeah, hopefully that gave enough information for the guys that lodged that one. Yeah, the Land XML as a string-based format, there's been some requests coming in to help expand into different markets, and the GenIO or GNIO files really didn't have a lot of usage outside of Australia and Canada, from my understanding. So it's part of a step towards more support of Land XML and more functionality in that area. But yeah, in the Australian market, we do see a lot of 12D. We did create a 12DA to GenIO converter, and that was probably 2018, I believe. So
Yep.
If you're not aware of that, just reach out to your local dealer, and they can run you through how to utilize that as well. It's quite a clever little tool. Okay. One for me again. Okay. So we had one come in. The Trimble instruments all have optical plummets, and what is available for dark environments where an optical plummet may not be the best solution. There are some other products out there that natively have an embedded laser plummet in there. Because we manufacture these with the best intentions of them being as accurate as possible, the optical plummets are a more accurate solution for plumbing. And these have been integrated into the hardware. If you do have a sort of corner case where you're needing to plumb in dark environments, if you have a look at Trimble optical accessories and just Google search or web browser search for Google Trimble optical accessories, you'll find a page with a lot of the different components that we offer to support our optical portfolio. And under Tribrax, you'll see there's a laser plummet that's available as well. These just go on replacing the original pass-through Tribrax that doesn't have an optical plummet embedded into it because it's in the instrument, and they allow for the plumbing to be done with the laser. As I said, you do get a little bit more error compared to optical because you have a slightly bigger dot on the ground than you would have with a crosshair, and you also don't have the ability to rotate the instrument and make sure that there isn't any error in the optics or the laser. So there's a few reasons for having the optics rather than the laser natively, but we do facilitate an accessory piece to be able to do that as well. So I'd always recommend you have a little look at the optical accessories page, and we have an accessories page for GNSS and for scanning as well, amongst other things. And there might be a few products in there to help you outside of what you're initially asking about, but just knowing where these resources are and how to get to them is always beneficial, I think. Okay, another one for you, James. I think we tried to alternate on these.
Yep, so this is it's asking with Trimble Access 2020, you can no longer create an alignment unless you've got the RXL format. Oops, sorry, my dog's barking. Yeah, so they'd like the option back. Yeah, so this is something that we'll pass on to the product manager. However, I'll just explain with the new functionality in Trimble Access 2020. So as I think I mentioned before, we can now stake polylines directly without the need to create an alignment. So it's just a matter of selecting your background file and making it the layers that you want both visible and selectable, and then you can click on it and stake it out. If you don't have a polyline, you can define one by entering in the point range. So that's pretty much similar to what existed in with the alignments with previous versions. Now the functionality is not quite the same. So you don't, for example, you can't stake a side slope from a polyline. However, you can still, if you've got an RXL file, you can still stake that RXL file as an alignment. As a bit of a workaround, what you can do is you can install the trial version of Trimble Access on an Office PC. So this is essentially a free demo version of Trimble Access, which I think it's got a limit of say 30 points if you're creating those points, although you can open larger jobs in it. You can connect to it a device from it for about 30 days, after which you can no longer connect, but you can still run it and you can still look at jobs. And what you can do is you can run the roads module in it and you can create an RXL file. So that'll give you the full, you can define a full alignment with like transition curves and arcs, and you can also do a vertical curve with with a parabolic or a circular vertical curves. So you can then take that and load that up onto your controller, even if you don't have the roads module there, and you can stake that out as an alignment. So there's a couple of options there, and as I say, we will be passing it on, and yeah, so I'd encourage, if there's anything that you'd like to see in Trimble Access, then talk to your dealer, and if you get enough interest in it, it's something that could be considered for the future.
Yeah, I think that clarifies that one. If people weren't aware, we do have the Trimble Access software available as the emulator. And as James mentioned, you just need to download Trimble Installation Manager, and that can deploy onto any Office PC. It's quite a good tool if you're wanting to evaluate the new additions. If you've been running on the older software and just wanted to have a look at what the newer versions are, we have it that it only basically installs the new releases. And that was something that we implemented a couple of years ago to just allow more people to access that emulator. And it can be quite good, whether you're taking jobs from the field and just wanting to check in the same user interface that you've been used to in the office, or for evaluation purposes, because it does have all of the modules on in there, and it allows you to create a GNSS simulation, so you can emulate as if you're walking around with a GPS with a little dialog box for that. And if you're very keen, you can also key into operate a manual total station, which instead of taking a measurement and getting the feedback from an instrument, you would key in the azimuth and vertical and slope distance that the instrument would usually supply. The changes here around not having the alignment and having the polyline, it's really just a simpler workflow, that if we have the polyline, you don't have to create that alignment, you don't have to go through a particular routine. It's just a neater workflow that people are finding a bit more beneficial. So hopefully that gives you enough information. And as James said, we do pass it on, but also just interact with your local dealer partner, and they'll be able to feed this information on as well, because we don't have these sessions all the time. But just make sure talk to your local distributor and let them know the problems that you might be having or the feedback that you want, the functions you want, and we always pass that through and make sure it's heard. Mustn't have mixed these up enough. Again, one for you, James. If you're ready to go.
Okay, yeah, so yeah.
Sorry, I thought I'd mix them up to be alternating. Like you're talking between.
Okay, yeah, so this is a question regarding tunnels, and yeah, so do I need to set a geographic coordinate system when scanning tunnels with an SX10? And what do I need to consider about the scale factor? Do I need to consider a scale factor, and do I need a coordinate system in TBC? Well, the short answer is no, you don't need a geographic coordinate system. You can just use a scale-only job. However, a geographic coordinate system would work as well. If you are setting a scale factor, you would usually set it to 1. And a tunnel is no different to any other construction project, really. So if you want to be working in ground-based coordinates, so that would mean setting up a ground-based coordinate system in either TBC or Trimble Access. There is actually some useful webinars which have just been posted this month. So I think there's a one that's been repeated for TBC on using the difference between grid and ground and setting up ground-based coordinate systems. So I'd encourage you to go on to trimble.com and look at that. There's also another one on the use of the SX10 data in TBC, and there's also there's a tunnels one as well with the new tunnel functionality in TBC. So I think hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and I don't, from my perspective of using TBC for quite a lot of years now, I don't think there's any functions that are limited to requiring any particular scale factor or reference frame as being either in a geographic and a true world projection, or just being at a 0, 0, and we're saying that it's scale factor 1. They generally work across the board. Probably the only thing that might not function is the web maps on the background, if you want to turn on the background maps or digital globe, because it needs to know where it is in the world. If it's 0, 0, it's not going to supply anything.
And another thing to consider, that if you are using a coordinate system, is to use suitable coordinates for that coordinate system. So you can't go and use a coordinate system and use assumed coordinates of 0, 0 if they're not appropriate for that coordinate system. Otherwise, you're going to get large scale factors applied. So just, yeah, it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, because we do see a little bit come in on that and how to navigate the wilds of coordinate systems, and it's a tricky area. There have been a few things on recently around grid and ground. I think we repeated a webinar on that, but we're going to get more and more complex over the next 5 years, where a lot more time-dependent coordinate systems start to come through. So that's functionality and support is coming through as well. But yeah, like James said, a lot of these, particular to tunnels and bridges, a lot of the time it is constructed on a scale 1, where we're putting it somewhere in the world, but not recognizing a combined scale factor as such. Neil's up, all-star, jump in.
Thanks. Actually, we're halfway through our canned questions. We chose 10 of the best and merged some of them together. We've only had 2 questions come through live, I can see. So for the participants out there, if anyone has a question, we've got 5 more from the presentation to go, and then there's only 2 so far to address after these, so feel free to add some more questions in. But this question has come in a couple of ways since 2020 came out last week. So there are now 4 precision, sorry, the question was, I've noticed that Trimble Access 2020 has 4 precision options for GNSS. What are these options as percentages, and why do we have more options? So it's sort of a merged question from a couple of questions that came in. The values you can see on the screen are from the Trimble Access online help portal. So if we'll put a link to that in the answers that we put on the Trimble community at the end of it. But if you Google Trimble Access Help Portal, there's a wealth of online information about Trimble Access you can easily search. But a big change. So historically, Trimble Access has always displayed the DRMS values for horizontal and vertical precision. So this is what we've used up until 2020. The request to have 1 sigma and other confidence levels, as you can see in the table here, has been around for quite some time. And Trimble Business Center has always been able to display multiple precision levels. So a common question we used to see was that we'd do an RTK job in Trimble Access and we could see our precision values in the field, and then we brought the data back into Trimble Business Center. And if we clicked on that vector, the precision values shown on that GNSS vector would be different to what's shown in Access. And it's because Trimble Business Center used to default to a 2 sigma or 95% confidence level. So there was often a bit of confusion about that, and some of our surveys in the field do require different precision levels to be shown in the field. So great work that we've finally got this one in, and like I said, there's this information online, and hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and I think as an industry standard of reporting, when you get, well, I can only speak for Australia and New Zealand, but marks are reported at an accuracy, a precision of 95%, and that's where TBC defaults to. So it does help to be able to validate that in the field and see it on the fly as well, which it does assist with a few workflows, and just helps to build out the certainty that when you're in the field and you measure a point, you can validate exactly what you need to as you're taking those measurements as well. So I think it's a really good introduction to give some flexibility around the precision reporting. Okay. All right, back to you, James.
Okay, so the question is, why does Trimble Access not allow you to take readings in a single shot instead of an average of 2 readings? Is there a user selection that allows you to modify the way the instrument measures to speed up the measurements and decide if you don't want the redundancy of more measurements? Well, yes, you don't have to measure in phase 1 and phase 2. You can just measure phase 1 only if you want. So so in the survey style, there's a setting which is, well, there's actually a group box of settings called auto phase 1, phase 2. And by default, these are disabled, and these are things like set out, measure topo points, or a station setup. If you're measuring rounds or a resection, what you can do is you can go into options before you start the resection or rounds and set it to F1 only if you only want to measure face 1 only. And similarly, measure topo, the default setting is just a single face measurement, unless you've gone in and you've enabled that auto phase 1, phase 2 option. So yeah, you certainly don't have to measure both phase 1 and phase 2. You can just do the one face if that's all that's needed.
Yeah, and I think with some of these questions, there wasn't a huge amount of detail, so we've tried to interpret, I think, what was being asked in here. And as I sort of reworded it to just make sure it was clear for people as we put them up on the slide deck, I was thinking about this, and the question may have also referred to that on the S series, when we set up and start to take a measurement, we're in a standard measurement mode, which does take a few measurements. You can switch that to tracking, which is giving a constant distance feedback, where it is done at a much higher rate of measurement. So if it wasn't relating to measuring on face left and face right, or face 1 and face 2, if it was relating to the actual amount of pulses, we do support a tracking mode, the standard measurement mode, where it takes a couple of measurements, and then there is an averaged observation measurement technique as well, where it will, I think the default is it takes 5 standard measurements, and it actually gives you some statistical information around those measurements, and if it's moving or deflecting, and we'll throw out an error as well if it's moving too much.
I mean, you can do that. Personally, I'd rather collect more information and make sure I've got it right than try and speed things up too much. But yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't get paid by the hour, so I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't do any station setups with tracking mode. I'd always do a standard. But if you're measuring a paddock or like a broad acre area and you're wanting to get through a lot of topographic survey points, then flicking onto tracking, you really don't have to stop and take as much time to take an individual measurement. So there's options for everything in there. Just going through the help menus and also, yeah, again, we've put this out here as a bit of a casual chat and for these questions that you might not get a chance to ask. So if we're not running one of these, your dealer network is always there, and they should pick up the phone anywhere in the business hours. Some of them operate some interesting business hours and will pick up at weird times as well. You're lucky if you've got those guys, but they'll be able to answer all of these and point you in the right direction and step you through it, and even screen share like we're doing with this and go through the menus and where you actually find these things. So if you don't find enough information from what we're talking about, then they'll be able to really dig into it a lot more and capture videos out or prepare screen snaps or something like that really help to consolidate that information. Okay, back to you, Neil.
Okay, so this is one we've seen a bit already since Trimble Access 2020 was released last week, and finally support for Android operating systems. So as Trimble Access is now available on devices with either Windows 10 or Android operating systems, can Trimble access job files from the TDC 600, which is the Android-based Trimble data collector, be given to a colleague with a TSC 7 and vice versa? So this is an excellent question, and I think as more companies start exploring the smaller Android device that's out there, and currently we only support this one model, but who knows what will be supported in the future. Yes, you can transfer a job file from the Android operating system TDC 600 to the TSC 7 on Windows 10 and vice versa. Now remember that Android support has only just come out in Trimble Access 2020. So the other controller you're sending to would need to be at least that version. And as we start increasing versions, they should be able to take, if the TSC 7 was, let's say, on 2020.10, it should be able to take a 2020.00 file. But we won't be able to put the TDC 600 2020 version on an old controller like a TSC2 or a TSC3. But it's great to have that compatibility between these two different operating systems, and would be interesting to see what's supported in the future as well.
And for people that are looking at migrating and updating with this release of Trimble Access 2020, there's been a tool created that will help convert all your existing files in one big bulk lot onto the new version, just to help with those migrations as well. You'll see that when mine installed, I think with my Trimble Access emulator, there would be a download for that as well. But the other way of doing this, if you are looking at transferring between, let's say, our more legacy controllers, something older, running the older Trimble Access versions like the 2017 and downwards, you can use the job XML. It's a JXL file. When you export to that, it makes it a little bit more generic, and then it's able to be imported into older controllers as well. And so you have selection around which version you do with that, and it's a way of transferring back and forth.
Sorry, 2017 or later, you can actually open in a newer job without the need to convert it. It's only earlier versions that you need to convert it. Yeah. So the only issue is you cannot go back. So you can go to a newer version, but you can't open a newer job in an older one. So that's when you need the job XML file.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that. With that release, we did put in some additional support there for interoperability between the two systems. So it's really on the earlier releases before that becomes a bit more difficult, or needing some different formats there. Okay. Me again. Okay. I cannot find a traversing program in Trimble Access. What is the workflow for traversing in this software? So we do have a adjust traverse routine in Trimble Access. It'd be under Kogo for the adjust traverse. And the way that it operates is it won't look for side shots, it won't look for individual observations. And if you're just doing your normal setup, backsight, foresight, and then moving on through, it will recognize that that they are, I guess, contiguous or joined measurements, and you can key that traverse in. So it's just a standard routine. There's nothing different there. You can choose to measure rounds or just take the observations and keep moving on. Usually for traversing, you would want to use our measure rounds function, which adds some redundancy into the observations, where it can take face left and face right onto both backsight and foresight, or you might have multiple sites as well, and then repeat those for rounds of measurement, which adds a lot of quality into the traverse, and then use that for the traverse adjustment as well. Is there anything you guys wanted to add to that?
Yeah, there is actually, I think with station setup and with measure rounds, there is actually a traversing mode. And what that does is it sort of swaps so it makes some assumptions about what, so you'll put your foresight and make that the backsight target record for the next setup and all that. So it sort of helps automate it a bit, so you've got the correct target height and that type of thing. A couple of things you need to watch out for is, I don't think the traverse adjustment works if you're using Station Setup Plus. So that's when you're using more than one backsight. However, you can take the Station Setup Plus and download it into TBC and do the traverse adjustment there. Also, the traverse adjustment that you do in Trimble Access, you will actually you can view later on in TBC if you import it. So the actual records are the same, and you can edit it and adjust it again in TBC if need be.
Yeah, and yeah, for people looking at that, I guess we use the terminology across into TBC of traverse adjustment, and then we have network adjustment, depending where you've sort of learnt your surveying from. The traverse adjustment in Business Centre there is a Bowditch adjustment, or Bowditch, depending on which part
Bowditch.
of the world, or transit is the other terminology, transit compass method. But the network adjustment is a full least squares adjustment, so you do get a lot more statistical redundancy, and it's a lot more rigorous adjustment by using the least squares or network adjustment compared to just a traverse adjustment. But I'll have to have a play with that traverse mode. Not one that I don't think I've particularly used, or not recently. I'd forgotten about that one. Okay, Neil, this one's for you, mate.
It's another new feature that came out from last week's release, which is certainly something different. So the question is, I noticed there is an additional option for SV sets in Trimble Access 2020. What is this used for? So I've tried to take a screen snap. Hopefully it's clear enough, but you can see down the bottom of the screen, there's an option to go to SV set B, because I'm actually already on set A when I took the screen snap. So the little arrow up the top shows I have 10 satellites in set A. So in some regions or countries or some organizations, they may have requirements to do independent measurements on a point. So historically, this may have been go and measure a point via GNSS and come back later on in the day and remeasure it for its independent check, where the satellite constellation will be in a different position with different satellites. So unlike just measuring it once, walking away, or even doing a new initialization and coming back, that wasn't good enough for some organizations. So with this handy new feature, we have, in this example, we had 20 satellites. and by hitting the SV set A, it now halved the amounts of satellites used. It's trying to spread the 20 satellites into 10 even groups of spread across the sky, and it splits them as evenly as it can between, so if we had 10 GPS, we'd have 5 in each subset, and the same with GLONASS and Galileo. So it's an even spread of all the constellations and an even spread across the sky. So we can take our measurements with this subset. So we've obviously got half the amount of satellites available, but then we could use subset B. So when we click on that button, it essentially reinitializes off those new satellites. So this menu, or this option to change from subset A to subset B and back to all, can be done from this screen, or choosing subset A and subset B can be chosen from the Measure RTK initialization menu, which is probably not used that much, but for people doing this kind of work in the past, they may have done some independent measurement by doing a new initialization, and that Measure RTK initialization would reset the initialization. So it's a handy new feature. We're hearing it was possibly something other countries have been wanting for a while. It'd be great to hear any enhancements on this, or how it's being used in the future as this release is the first time that we've had it.
Yeah, and like I know there was some interest in this, and parts of New Zealand were looking at this to have the satellite-based independency rather than time-based independent observations. And in Australia, I'm going to be looking into it with some of the authorities and find out, okay, we've got so many satellites compared to when your legislation, or might not even be legislation, might just be recommendations were written. Can we now start to use this, and it qualifies it for the requirements that the surveyors have to set? And it's been made based on a few people after it. In the couple of weeks since our Trimble Access 2020 release, it turns out there's been more interest in this. It's just been relatively silent. So if you do have particular cases where this is relevant and you want more information, or just to understand how it's operating a bit more, then let us know. Speak to your dealer network, and also find out with the government authorities if you're in that type of position, to find out if this is relevant for you, because in some instances it might be quite a bit of time saving if you don't have to reoccupy based on a time separation, and you're only going out to each point once and then just doing constellation-based independent checks. Because in a lot of places now, we can track a huge amount of satellites, and you might be tracking 40 satellites, even more than at times. So yeah, really clever one, and nice to have in Trimble Access 2020, and we'll see where we can take it from here. Okay, so I think I want to go back a slide, and we can leave it on. Let's jump back to that one, and then we'll take some of the questions that have been coming in from the audience. So Neil, you put your hand up for having a look at the RTX question that came in. Are you ready to go on that?
Okay, so I'll read out the question. It's for our Australian users as far as the specifics on this one, but it does apply to the RTX use in Trimble Access going forward. So I'll read out the question and then I'll elaborate on it. So in Trimble Access 2020, how does the new RTX engine work using current epochs? Should I use this, or can I revert to a static datum, e.g. GDA 2020? So in Australia, the coordinate system has recently moved to GDA 2020. Historically, they've been using GDA 94. Now, the RTX use in Trimble Access up until now has always been using ITRF 2008 and then to Epoch 2005. So with GDA 94 being set in 1994, we had about an 88 or 85 centimetre movement in a northeast direction as the tectonic plate moved from 1994 to 2005. So using RTX was great, but we were always this 88 centimeters off what our survey marks were without doing a site calibration. So the Trimble Access 2020 release has changed the way that the coordinate systems look. So I'm actually just going to open up my Trimble Access. Unfortunately, you guys can't see this, but if anyone's used Trimble Access 2020, you'll now see the terms global reference datum, and you'll see a global reference epoch. So I'm looking at a New Zealand coordinate system in front of me on the screen at the moment. And in New Zealand here, we use a 2000 datum, New Zealand Geodetic Datum 2000. So the epoch is 2000. So if I was to use RTX with this coordinate system, the tectonic plate models in the receivers should be projecting the coordinates to the reference epoch in this coordinate system. And for you, Gareth, for using GDA 2020, it should be projecting it to the 2020 reference epoch as well. So as this is so new, and I guess it's only been tested in a few places at the moment, we believe this is going to get you very close to your GDA 2020 marks, Gareth. So as we chat a fair bit, no doubt we can take this conversation after you've done some testing. I did a lot of testing with the RTX back in the previous versions when we were using GDA 94 in Australia, and I'd love to hear some results and see how good it is, because we used to do that site calibration to translate everything about that 85 centimeters to get it back onto the survey marks. So hopefully that gives a bit of an understanding of the big change here with Trimble Access 2020, and as time goes by, feedback regarding how it's working. Are we matching into our geodetic datums in our country without having to do site calibrations anymore? It'd be really good to get this kind of feedback.
Yeah, anecdotally, I've gone out and done a little bit of checking just on the VRS Now correction over IP, and it wasn't any points that were particularly accurate. I was just down at the local park near me, so I was measuring to the corner of a cricket pitch, which is covered with that fake grass, so it's not very exact, and I'm sure I wasn't on the same point each time. But with the RTX correction coming in, no bipod or anything, I was staking out and getting between 0 and 15 mil on the corner of that each time. So it does seem pretty consistent. Anecdotally, talking to one of the product team in the US, they were getting some really, really tight results. I think they were using a bit more rigor in their survey practice to check these things, but yeah, so far it seems pretty good. Okay, probably the other one that, depending on where you are, you can create a 7-parameter transformation for the older controllers in the coordinate system database that will get you very, very close before doing a site cal. So it might get you down to a centimeter or two, or let's say sub 5 centimeters with a 7-parameter transformation, and they can be set up in the coordinate system database. So if you're not familiar with doing that, then have a chat to your dealer and make them stretch their grey matter on how to do those and key them in. We did get one question. With the web map services that are in Trimble Access, they are different from what's in Trimble Business Center. So it's come in a few times around being able to use the same databasing. The arrangement that Trimble Business Center has is just for that software, that it's not sort of shared outside of that. If we're seeing that a lot of people don't have access to a web map service, or the government don't supply a web map service in your country, then it it's definitely one to keep on to us about, and we can find out a bit more about what would be the problems or in interfacing that into Trimble Access. In Australia, there's generally something available in each state or at a government level, same for New Zealand. There are a few that use OpenStreetMap and publish that globally, depending on which country you're in. I've seen several that are free, but they may only support country by country. So if you're having a look at OpenStreetMap WMS, then you should find some links to doing those for parts of Europe, the US, and the rest of the APAC region as well. Just see what works, what doesn't. It will take a little bit of digging, and sometimes your local dealer rep might have already done that for you and can just supply you with some URLs to be able to get that set up and then off and running. A few people do run their own web map services. Things like OpenStreetMap can be rehosted and pushed out through your own local servers. Don't think many people would do that, but there is facility to do it. And so if people are wanting something that's easier to set up and you just click a button, and it might not be that it's as accurate as a web map service that's adopting exact datum, it's kind of more like that Google Maps accuracy, then yeah, it'd be good to know. From this portal, we've seen 2 questions come in, so it's obviously a topic at the moment that we should have a bit more of a look at.
It is, yeah, it's something which, because it is regional, it's quite kind of hard for us to sort of get in and know all the different systems that are available. However, we'd encourage anyone who's on the Trimble community and is using a WMS system to perhaps mention it on there and give some details, find out what they're working, what they're using, what settings and all that. So that way we can sort of share the information around.
Yeah, I probably need to do that. I've got some working for Victoria, Queensland, and I think there was one working for Tasmania and West Australia as well that I need to just document a little bit more to help with. But I know Allterra New Zealand did some documentation around the LINS system, and
yeah,
I'd really...
I got the LINS one working, but I can't remember how I did it. So yes, so you have to actually register with the LINS one, and there's an API code which you have to add into a command line or something. So it's not trivial. It takes a bit of setting up.
Yeah, Geoscience Australia is very, very straightforward. You just need to put it in there. Usually the one thing for people doing that, once we run it, you can cut down the amount of layers in the text file in the background, so that as you expand, some of these web map services might have 200 or 300 layers. You can cut that down so that each time you expand it, you only get the 5 that you want. But yeah, really the dealer in each region, really encourage them to have a look at this, or the Trimble sales team in each region. They may have already done this work and done this investigation. Just ask them, see if they can resolve it for you and get you some information, because it's a great tool to be able to switch off and on if you haven't done that office data preparation, and then you can be up and running a bit more in the field.
And I'll just add the final comment, and then I'll move on to the next one, although I'm not quite sure on it. The reason why they went with WMS format is because there were specific enhancement requests for it. So I think there was a question there, someone asking why we don't support the same format as the TBC, as you can with TBC. It's because there were specific people who wanted that WMS format, and it's something that's more localized rather than a generic one, which is possibly of limited use. Right. So I guess you want to get me to go on to the last question now. Do you want me to read that out? Not sure if I can answer it, but I'll...
yeah, I'm not sure about that one either. If we could get a bit more detail, if John's still on the line, we sort of weren't quite sure there. If you could just put another one in there.
Yeah, do you want me to read it out?
Flesh that out? Yeah, that'd be great.
So John's asking, in TBC 5.3, I can export all points and lines in a VCL format except as set out points. I can export as set out corridors, set out lines, etc. I want to slim down a large file to produce as built and can be able to be transformed coordinates. Yeah. So are these points are they as stake points that you have measured out in the field? And if so, you might be able to. There's an option to convert as stake points into normal points, so that might get them. I haven't done this myself, and I haven't actually played much with the VCL format as well. It's something that's possibly done more on the construction side, because they have sort of machine and field software which will support the VCL format. So I would try that. Yeah.
It might be a case of, yes, as staked points. I tried converting, they won't convert.
Okay.
I've got a
Send the
theory.
file
I've got a theory
into-
on this one, guys.
Yep.
We've seen a lot of issues over the past where if the geoids used on the controller is not a 100% match
yes. Yep.
in Trimble Business Center, we can't do the conversion of as stake points. So it must be, John, we might have to take this offline and try and work that out. But if you have an NZ geoid up there in Auckland and it's a subgrid or it's got a slightly different name to the, here we go, you said yes. Okay, so
Yep.
if you have a slightly different geoid on the controller that's used by TBC, even though it could be NZ Geoid 16, which I'm guessing that you're using, but maybe it's a localized one, the names must match. So you're gonna have to get that geoid from the controller into Trimble Business Center, and then the as staked points will be convertible. We do see this one a lot. It's gone to the development team. It does catch a lot of people out. So it's essential when we want to convert those points that the geoid on the controller is a 100% match in name and the actual file in the coordinate system manager. So,
and these days, I mean, if the controllers have got a lot more memory than what they used to have. So, if you can, just put the whole geoid model on the controller and use that. The other thing you can do, if you, this gets back to having the trial version of Trimble Access emulator on your PC, you can go in there and if you want to use the subgrid out in the field and you don't have it on your local one, you can go through, open up the job in the emulator and change the geoid model to the full one if need be, and then or as Neil says, you can have your subgrid and load that into Coordinate System Manager as a geoid in its own right.
Oh, this is why we put the experts on the line. Okay. I'll do that. Okay, we don't have too many more questions coming in. I think we've might as well take another one. Looks like, get those fingers firing, John, and type another one in. Happy to take it. We've still got a little bit of time left. So if anyone else has got a question, just ping those in now. Okay, PDF exports in vector formats. Have you seen this, guys?
We actually had this come into support last week, so the answer is no. The question last week was from the United States and wanted to show PDF with vector line work on a handheld device to understand maybe if there were cables or things. But in the end, the dealer started talking with the user a bit more, thinking DXFs are the way to go. John, not sure about your reason why, but the answer's no. Maybe we can find out a bit more of what you want. So maybe send that one through Altera, or our contact details directly. Send us through why you want it. It's just strange that now it's come up twice in the past week and very, very rarely before. So maybe drop us a bit more info about that one.
Okay. I've just got one sitting in here that we've got a webinar starting in probably 3.5 minutes now. So we might need to take the last couple offline because I don't think that one that just popped in, that's sort of a flow on. We probably won't get to that in enough detail to make it worthwhile. So John, you've got my contact details as well. Notorious. If you've got any questions, just to cap off, we will hope to run another one of these in the future. If based on demand, people enjoy it and want to see it again as a different platform. But make sure you're talking to your dealer network because they're really the sometimes a lot more knowledgeable for these particularly regional cases where something like a web map service, finding a particular site that helps you solve that in your region. And for anybody that's working within the dealer network or Trimble, then you're able to contact all of the guys at geospatial support and your sales team and product group. So yeah, don't feel like you have to push it through this platform. Just make some noise and get in contact, and we'll all be happy to help. All right, we better call it quits. Thanks for jumping on, James and Neil, and thanks for facilitating, Felicity. It's been a bit of fun.
It's okay, our pleasure. And thanks to all the people for tuning in and giving us the questions.
Okay, hope to see you next time round, and we'll cap it off there. Cheers, guys.
See you later.